The message rippled through human space faster than any official communication ever could. Captains of merchant vessels diverted course without explanation to their non-human clients. Retired military personnel reported to the nearest coalition outposts, offering their services. On a dozen worlds, human colonists began preparing medical supplies and relief packages without waiting for official requests. Aboard the Inexorable, the crew worked with silent efficiency as the massive warship pushed its engines beyond safety parameters. Lieutenant Parker in engineering watched the containment field monitors with growing concern. "We're seeing microfractures in the secondary cooling systems," he reported. "If we don't reduce output by at least 15%, we risk a cascade failure." "Maintain current output," came the captain's reply. "Reroute emergency power to reinforce the containment fields." "But Captain, the Elysians don't have time for us to play it safe, Lieutenant," Rise interrupted, her voice cutting through his objections like a blade. "Every hour we delay means more deaths." In the ship's armory, Marines checked their powered combat suits, reinforced exoskeletons designed to amplify human strength and speed to levels that most coalition species found terrifying. Sergeant Amara Okonkwo supervised as her squad loaded specialized ammunition designed to incapacitate rather than kill. "The Marudians have enhanced carapaces," she reminded her team. "Aim for joint connections and sensory clusters. And remember, our priority is rescuing Elysian civilians, not racking up kills." Private Jenkins, the youngest member of the squad, looked up from his weapon checks. "Sarge, is it true that Marudians eat their captives?" Okonkwo's expression hardened. "They harvest organs from certain species, Jenkins. The Elysians' resonance crystals fetch high prices in black markets. That's why we need to move fast and hit hard." On the bridge, First Officer Chen approached Captain Rice with a datapad. "We've intercepted communications from the Coalition Security Council," she reported quietly. "They're demanding we abort the mission and return to our assigned patrol route." Rice didn't even glance at the pad. "File it appropriately, Commander." Chen's lips twitched in a suppressed smile. "Already done, Captain. It suffered an unfortunate data corruption during transmission." Across the ship, human crew members shared knowing glances. Coalition bureaucracy moved at a glacial pace, deliberating while people died. It was one of the fundamental disconnects between humans and many other species, the human unwillingness to sacrifice lives on the altar of procedure. "Weapons check complete," reported Tactical Officer Abasi. "Kinetic strike packages primed and ready. Boarding teams standing by." Ray studied the tactical display, where the Elysian system slowly grew larger. Time to arrival. 12 hours, 17 minutes at current velocity, navigation answered. "We're pushing the engines 20% beyond rated maximums." The ship's eye assistant chimed in, its synthetic voice carefully modulated to avoid triggering stress responses. "Captain, I've analyzed the quantum signature of the distress call. Based on degradation patterns, I estimate it was sent approximately 43 hours ago." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. 43 hours. In a slave raid, that was an eternity. How many Elysians had already been loaded onto transports? How many killed when they resisted? Reyes tapped her command console, opening a ship-wide channel. "This is the captain speaking. By now you all know our mission. The Elysians are under attack by Marudian slavers. These are the same Elysians who sheltered our people during the colony wars, who shared their technologies with us when others wanted to keep us isolated." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I won't lie to you. We're likely facing a situation where many lives have already been lost. But I promise you this, every Elysian still alive when we arrive will stay that way. And those responsible will learn why humans are classified as a protected threat species." Rise out. As the Inexorable hurtled through slip space, its hull groaning under the strain, the crew prepared for war. Not the sanitized, rule-bound conflicts that the Coalition preferred, but the kind of desperate, furious combat that had forged humanity on their deadly homeworld. In the Coalition Senate emergency chamber, The debate grew more heated by the minute. Senior diplomatic aides rushed between delegation pods, whispering urgent updates as reports of more human ships abandoning their posts filtered in. 17 warships is no longer accurate. The Palaxian intelligence liaison announced, their voice synthesis module struggling to maintain calm modulation. We are now tracking 23 human vessels converging on the Elysian system, including the Dreadnought * Retribution *, which was supposed to be undergoing refit at Arcturus Station. Ambassador Zheng, the senior human representative present, sat silently while other species expressed their outrage. Unlike Admiral Zhang, who commanded military respect, Zheng cultivated a deliberately unassuming presence, a strategy that had served humanity well in diplomatic circles. How did they even coordinate this? Demanded the Valerian High Speaker. There was no central command, no official orders issued. Zheng finally spoke, her voice soft enough that others had to quiet to hear her. The Vengeance Protocol is pre-coded into all human military neural interfaces. Once activated, it operates on consensus principles. Each captain independently decides whether to respond, but all who do share tactical data instantly. That's a violation of coalition military integration standards, objected Senator Cloth. All coalition forces must operate under centralized command structures. Zheng's smile was unnervingly placid. The protocol predates our membership in the coalition by 73 years. It was grandfathered in under the cultural preservation clauses that your own species insisted upon. Across the chamber, synapsychologists exchanged worried glances. They had studied humanity's evolution on a high-gravity death world, but many still struggled to reconcile the calm, cooperative humans they worked alongside with the predatory efficiency displayed in crisis situations. What exactly is this Vengeance Protocol? Asked the Lorexian ambassador, her translator rendering her harmonics into clipped, precise speech. Zheng considered her answer carefully. During our early expansion period, human colonies were vulnerable to raiders and slavers. Response times from Earth were measured in months. So we developed a distributed defense doctrine. Any attack on human settlements triggered an automatic response from all military assets within range. And you extended this protocol to non-human allies. The Lorexian pressed. To those who have earned it, Zheng confirmed. The Elysians sheltered thousands of human refugees during the colony wars. By our oldest laws, that creates a blood debt. The term blood debt triggered warning flags in multiple xenolinguistic translation systems. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably as their cultural advisors hurriedly explained the concept's significance in human psychology. Meanwhile, the human fleet continued its relentless advance toward Elysia. Aboard the Thermopylae *, Commander Okafor conducted final briefings with a cold precision that unnerved even his most experienced officers. The Marudians evolved as pack hunters, he explained, gesturing to the anatomical displays. They prefer to surround their prey and attack from multiple angles simultaneously. In space combat, they rely on similar tactics, swarming patterns designed to overwhelm defensive systems. How do we counter, sir? Asked Lieutenant Vasquez. We don't, Okafor replied with a predatory smile. We let them swarm us. In fact, we encourage it. A ripple of confusion passed through the briefing room. Chief Tactical Officer Xiang raised her hand. Sir, their numerical advantage makes that approach extremely high risk. Precisely, Okafor agreed, which is why they'll never expect it. The Marudians hunt species they consider prey. They've never faced predators who evolved on a higher gravity world with faster reaction times and redundant organ systems. He activated a new tactical display showing the approaching human vessels. Each ship will operate independently, presenting multiple threats the enemy must address simultaneously. We will apply localized overwhelming force at points of our choosing, then disengage before they can coordinate countermeasures. Hit and run, summarized Lieutenant Commander Baker. Guerrilla tactics against a numerically superior force. With one important difference, Okafor added, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Guerrillas typically can't operate in vacuum, and they don't usually command warships with kinetic strike capabilities. As the briefing concluded, Okafor received a priority alert from Admiral Zhang. Coalition security forces have been dispatched to contain the human fleet, a euphemism for intercepting and potentially engaging the rogue vessels. Okafor forwarded the alert to all human captains with a single additional line: maintain course. Obstacles will be avoided, not engaged. The message was clear. Human vengeance would not be deterred, but neither would they fire on coalition forces. They would simply go around them, under them, or through them without shooting. Because when humans truly committed to war, they wasted no ammunition on secondary targets. Lieutenant Chen watched the tactical display as the 3 Marudian frigates closed on her position. Her options were limited. The Swift Vengeance was a scout vessel designed for stealth and reconnaissance, not direct combat against multiple warships. But the Elysian transports were still being loaded. She needed to buy time. Helm, prepare for maneuver pattern Epsilon 7. She ordered, her voice betraying none of the adrenaline surging through her system. Weapons, load kinetic penetrators in tubes 1 through 4. Target the propulsion systems only. Her weapons officer, Lieutenant Rodriguez, glanced up in surprise. Ma'am, those penetrators are survey equipment. They're not designed for combat use. Their dense metal rods accelerated to significant velocity. Chen replied with a grim smile. Physics doesn't care what they were designed for. On the Marudian command ship, Tactical Officer Garthil reported with growing concern. Supreme Hunter, the human vessel is altering its energy emissions in a pattern consistent with weapons activation. Grakthar chittered dismissively. A single scout against 3 frigates. Let them try. It will be a valuable test of their capabilities before the main fleet arrives. Sensors detect unusual modifications to their kinetic launch systems, Garthil continued. Configuration does not match known human weapon profiles. Improvisation, Grakthar noted with reluctant admiration. The hallmark of prey species forced to adapt or die. Still, they face 3 of our hunting-class vessels. Observe and record for tactical analysis. The Marudian frigates spread out in a classic envelopment pattern, their forward weapon ports glowing with charged energy. They expected the human vessel to either flee or make a desperate stand, both standard responses they had encountered countless times during centuries of successful raids. Instead, Lieutenant Chen did something that momentarily confused the Marudian targeting systems. She accelerated directly toward the lead frigate, then executed a high maneuver that sent her small vessel skimming just 200 meters above the frigate's hull, well inside the minimum range of its main weapons. Firing penetrators, Rodriguez announced, his fingers dancing across the targeting controls. The repurposed survey equipment, normally used to take core samples from asteroids, launched from the Swift Vengeance at nearly relativistic velocity. 4 metal rods, each barely larger than a human forearm, struck the Marudian frigate's exposed engine section with pinpoint accuracy. The effect was catastrophic. The rods passed completely through the frigate's hull, shredding critical power conduits and propulsion systems before continuing into space. Alarms shrieked across the Marudian vessel as emergency containment fields struggled to prevent atmospheric venting. Direct hits, Rodriguez confirmed, already reconfiguring the remaining penetrators. Target 1 has lost main propulsion and is venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. The other frigates are adjusting their approach vectors, reported the sensor officer. They're trying to box us in. Chen nodded as if this was exactly what she'd expected. Helm, bring us about to heading 047 Mark 32, full impulse. Take us between targets 2 and 3. Ma'am, that course puts us directly in the crossfire of both vessels, the helmsman objected. Exactly, Chen replied. They'll have to reduce power to avoid hitting each other. That's when we execute pattern Theta 9. Aboard the Marudian command ship, Grakthar watched in growing disbelief as the human scout vessel executed maneuvers that his tactical officers had initially declared impossible. The G-forces involved should have incapacitated any living pilot, yet the small ship moved with a precision that suggested its crew was not merely surviving but functioning optimally under conditions that would kill most species. How are they withstanding such acceleration? Demanded his second-in-command. Grakthar's mandibles clicked in agitation. They evolved on a high-gravity world. Their internal organs are naturally braced against pressure. Their circulatory systems have adaptation mechanisms our species never needed. He watched as the human vessel slipped between two of his frigates, forcing them to check their fire to avoid friendly damage. In the split second of confusion, the scout launched another volley of improvised weapons, this time targeting the external sensor arrays of both ships with surgical precision. "Warn all vessels," Grakthar ordered, a new note of urgency in his voice. "This isn't a standard coalition response. The humans aren't fighting according to any recognized doctrine. They're hunting." As the engagement continued, Chen's tactical genius became increasingly apparent. She never stayed still long enough to present a target, never followed predictable patterns, and consistently exploited weaknesses that the Marudians didn't even realize existed in their formation. "They fight like cornered prey that suddenly turned predator," observed Grakthar's tactical advisor. "It's unsettling." "No," Grakthar corrected, watching as a third frigate transmitted surrender protocols after losing both propulsion and weapons control. "They fight like something that evolved alongside predators, learning our weaknesses while developing defenses against our strengths. They fight like humans." Supreme Hunter Grakthar's tactical display erupted with new alerts as 16 more human vessels dropped out of slip space in rapid succession. Unlike conventional coalition battle groups that emerged in tight formation, these ships appeared at seemingly random coordinates across a vast area of space, each one perfectly positioned to target a different segment of the Marudian fleet. "Impossible," Grakthar whispered, his compound eyes struggling to track the multiple threats simultaneously. "Their emergence patterns have no logical structure. How can they coordinate without a unified approach vector?" His tactical officer's mandibles clicked rapidly in distress. "Unknown, Supreme Hunter. They appear to be operating independently rather than as a coordinated fleet." "That makes no tactical sense," Grakthar insisted. "Fleets must maintain formation to concentrate firepower and coordinate defensive screens." Before his officers could respond, Admiral Zhang's transmission reached every Marudian ship simultaneously, somehow bypassing their communication encryption. "This is your only warning. Release all Elysian captives and surrender your vessels. You have 5 minutes to comply." Grakthar snarled, mandibles spread wide. "We outnumber them. The Marudian Empire does not surrender to lesser species." He activated the fleet-wide command channel. "All vessels, attack pattern Sigma Prime. Target the largest human ships first and overwhelm their defensive systems with concentrated fire." But the human fleet refused to behave according to any tactical doctrine Grakthar had studied. Instead of forming a defensive perimeter, the human ships accelerated toward the Marudian fleet at velocities that strained structural integrity limits. Their approach vectors seemed random, chaotic, until Grakthar's senior analyst noticed the pattern. "Supreme Hunter," she reported urgently, "they're not targeting our warships. They're positioning to intercept the slave transports." Grakthar's compound eyes widened in realization. "Divert escorts to protect the transports. The harvest must be preserved." Aboard the human battleship Thermopylae *, Commander Okafor watched as the Marudian fleet scrambled to reposition. "They've taken the bait," he noted with cold satisfaction. Defensive formation shifting to protect their transports, just as projected. "All assault teams report ready," his operations officer confirmed. "Boarding torpedoes primed and targeting solutions locked." Okafor nodded, his expression betraying none of the fury driving his actions. "Execute Phase 2. Selective targeting only. Disable. Don't destroy unless absolutely necessary. We need those Elysians alive." Across the human fleet, marine deployment pods launched simultaneously. hundreds of them, each containing a squad of human soldiers in powered assault armor. The Marudians had never encountered this tactic before. Most species considered it insanity to deliberately fire living troops across open space at relativistic speeds. "What are those?" demanded Grakthar, as his sensors registered the swarm of small objects accelerating toward his fleet. "Analysis suggests boarding craft," his tactical officer replied in disbelief. "They're launching troops directly at our vessels through vacuum." "Intercept them," Grakthar ordered, but the human pods employed evasive patterns too erratic for automated defense systems to track effectively. Designed by engineers who understood predator targeting algorithms, they moved like panicked prey, except they were heading toward danger, not away from it. The first pods impacted a slave transport's outer hull, penetrating meters of armor before deploying shaped charges that breached the vessel's interior compartments. From these metallic cocoons emerged humanity's answer to the Marudian threat, Marines in powered armor that amplified their already formidable strength and speed. Chief Warrant Officer Amara Okonkwo was first through the breach, her helmet sensors instantly mapping the transport's interior. "Breaching Team Alpha successful," she reported calmly as her squad secured the entry point. Proceeding to primary objective. The Marudian security team that responded found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered. Their natural advantages: chitinous armor, multiple limbs, enhanced sensory systems, had made them apex predators against most species. But humans from a high-gravity world, further enhanced by powered armor, moved with a speed that their evolutionary instincts classified as impossible. Okonkwo's first encounter with the transport's defenders lasted less than 15 seconds. Her squad executed their breach protocol with mechanical precision. Non-lethal suppression fire to disorient, then targeted strikes to incapacitate. The Marudians, expecting prey behavior of desperation and panic, were unprepared for the cold efficiency of trained human Marines. "Contact neutralize," Okonkwo reported, stepping over unconscious Marudian guards. Proceeding to holding areas. Similar scenes played out across multiple transports as human boarding teams systematically secured vessel after vessel. Their priority was clear and singular: find and protect the Elysian captives. On his command ship, Grakthar watched in mounting horror as his carefully planned harvest operation collapsed around him. How? He demanded of no one in particular. How did they respond so quickly? How are they fighting so effectively? His senior advisor, an old veteran of 100 successful raids, offered the only answer that made sense: because we threatened something they consider theirs. As Rise led her team deeper into the crystalline ruins of the Elysian capital, the evidence of systematic destruction became impossible to ignore. This wasn't random violence or the collateral damage of combat. Each cultural center had been deliberately targeted, each historical repository methodically demolished. They knew exactly what they were looking for, Lieutenant Park observed, kneeling to examine shattered crystal fragments that still hummed with faint harmonic energies. These weren't just random attacks. They had maps targeting priorities. Reyes nodded grimly. Her combat suit's sensors continued to detect trace elements of the bioweapon the Marudians had deployed, a pathogen specifically engineered to attack the unique crystalline biology of the Elysians. It targeted the resonance patterns that served as both their nervous and circulatory systems, causing cascading failures that literally shattered their bodies from within. "Sergeant Morozov, set up a perimeter," she ordered. "Dr. Chung, begin collecting bioweapon samples for analysis. I want to know who designed this. Standard Marudians don't have this level of bioengineering capability." As her team secured the area, Rise approached the captured Marudian overseer, who sat bound under guard. Unlike the warrior caste they'd encountered earlier, this specimen was smaller, with more developed frontal lobes and specialized manipulator appendages. "You're wasting time," the overseer sneered, mandibles clicking in what humans had learned was amusement. "By now, the primary harvest transports have already jumped to our secure facilities. These stragglers are just the ones we deemed too damaged to be worth processing. Reyes crouched down to eye level with the Meridian, her helmet retracted, allowing the alien to see her face, a deliberate psychological tactic. Most species found direct eye contact with humans deeply unsettling due to the predatory intensity of their gaze. "I'm not asking about your slave operation," she said quietly. "I want to know who paid you to target this specific world, at this specific time, with a bioweapon engineered precisely for Elysian physiology." The Overseer's compound eyes widened slightly, the first sign of genuine surprise. "You think too small, human. You see only the harvest before you, not the greater purpose it serves." "Enlighten me," Reyes replied with dangerous calm. The Meridian studied her for a moment, then chittered again in that unsettling laugh. "They are livestock. As are you. Some species are meant to be used by their betters. It is the natural order of the galaxy." Reyes maintained her unnervingly steady gaze. "You misunderstand our place in the galaxy. We're not potential slaves." She gestured to the destruction around them. "We're what keeps the monsters at bay." "You speak of monsters," the Overseer replied. "Yet look at what your species has done in mere hours. How many of my kind have your forces killed today? How efficiently you hunt, how precisely you destroy. Are you not the apex predator you claim to despise?" For a moment, the human captain didn't respond. Then she stood, her expression unchanged. "The difference," she said finally, "is choice. We choose when to unleash our capacity for violence. We direct it, control it, use it to protect rather than dominate." She turned as Lieutenant Sato approached with a datapad. "Captain, we've managed to access some of the intact Elysian data crystals. You need to see this." The information displayed on the screen caused Reyes' expression to harden further. Surveillance footage showed Meridian specialists systematically extracting specific data crystals from the Elysian archives, the oldest and most historically significant sections. "They weren't just harvesting people," Sato explained. "They were harvesting information, targeting specific historical records dating back to the early Coalition period." Reyes looked back at the Overseer, whose mandibles had gone tellingly still. "This wasn't a slave raid," she stated flatly. "It was an information purge disguised as one. Someone wants to erase parts of history." Deep in the ruined complex, Sergeant Morozov's voice came urgently over the comm. "Captain, we found survivors, a lot of them, hidden in some kind of shielded vault beneath the main conclave." When Reyes and her team reached the location, they found dozens of Elysian children protected by a handful of adults. The adults' crystalline forms showed advanced degradation from the bioweapon, yet they had positioned themselves as living shields around the young ones. One elder, his crystalline form cracked and failing, looked up at the human captain with multifaceted eyes. Despite the damage to his body, his voice resonated with surprising strength. "You came," he whispered. "The old stories said you would, that when darkness fell, the Deathworlders would answer our call." Reyes knelt beside him, medical scanner already assessing his condition. "We have transport standing by. We can get you to our medical ships." The elder's light pulsed weakly. "Too late for me. But the children, they carry our future. And these," he gestured toward a concealed compartment where dozens of small crystal shards gleamed, "our true archives, the complete record that they sought to destroy." "Who?" Reyes pressed gently. "Who wanted these records destroyed?" "The Dominion," the elder whispered, his voice fading. "They move through shadows, control from afar. The Meridians are merely their instruments. These records prove their existence, their plans. Find Archivist Kelix on Elysia Prime. Tell her the song continues. She will understand." As her medics worked frantically to stabilize the survivors, Reyes examined one of the crystal shards, an innocuous-looking fragment that seemed to shimmer with internal light when tilted just so. Somehow she knew that what they'd uncovered today went far beyond a simple slave raid or even genocide. This was the first thread of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of galactic civilization. The emergency session of the Galactic Senate stretched into its 14th hour as diplomatic teams struggled to craft responses to the rapidly evolving crisis. Coalition news feeds had begun broadcasting footage from Elysia, images of human medical teams treating crystalline children, Marines evacuating survivors, and engineers working to stabilize shattered structures. Public opinion across Coalition space was shifting hour by hour. Species that had initially condemned the human intervention now watched in uncomfortable silence as the true scope of the Elysian tragedy became apparent. Senator Kavoth refused to yield the speaking platform despite repeated calls for rotation. These emotional appeals changed nothing. He insisted, his tentacles lashing in agitation. The humans deliberately circumvented proper channels. They deployed military forces without authorization. If we allow such actions to stand unchallenged, we invite anarchy. From her position at the witness podium, Admiral Zhang observed the senator with clinical detachment. Her neural implants were simultaneously processing 6 different tactical updates from the Elysian system, yet her outward demeanor remained perfectly composed. "Senator," she replied when he finally paused for breath. Coalition emergency response protocols required a minimum 48-hour deliberation period before authorizing intervention. Our analysis indicated that 70% of the Elysian population would have been either dead or transported beyond recovery in that time frame. She gestured to the data scrolling across the chamber's main display. As it stands, we arrived too late to save approximately 35% of the population. Had we waited for Coalition authorization, we would be discussing the complete extinction of a founding member species. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as the implications sank in. The Palaxian delegate, whose species had once faced a similar extinction threat, raised their primary appendage for recognition. "I wish to enter into the record," they began formally, "that the Palaxian conclave officially supports the human intervention at Elysia. While procedural violations occurred, the prevention of genocide takes moral precedence." Zhang nodded respectfully to the Palaxian, but her attention was drawn to Senator Xarvik, who had remained conspicuously silent throughout the proceedings. His iridescent scales seemed unusually dull today, and his legislative aides appeared visibly nervous. "If I may address the specific allegations of treaty violations," Zhang continued, redirecting the conversation. "Article 7 of the Sentient Rights Accord explicitly authorizes immediate intervention when genocide is in progress. Furthermore, we have recovered financial transactions linking the Meridian operation directly to accounts controlled by members of this body." The specific names and transaction details materialized above the Senate floor. The chamber erupted in chaos as senators found themselves unexpectedly implicated. "This is human fabrication," shouted one accused senator, a Belvorian whose financial connections to frontier mining operations were well documented. Zhang's expression didn't change. "The data has been authenticated by 3 independent blockchain authorities, including one from your own homeworld, Senator." She looked around the chamber. Humanity joined this coalition with one understanding, that the strong would protect the weak. If this body cannot uphold that principle, then perhaps the coalition no longer serves its purpose. In the rear of the chamber, Ambassador Ezekiel Okafor observed the proceedings with the practiced eye of a career diplomat. Unlike Zhang's military precision, Okafor's strength lay in his understanding of the currents of power that flowed beneath the surface of coalition politics. He noted which delegations appeared genuinely shocked by the financial evidence, which reacted with practiced outrage, and which maintained suspicious neutrality. He watched as small clusters of aides exchanged worried glances and hurried messages. Most tellingly, he observed Senator Xarvik's uncharacteristic silence. When Zhang concluded her testimony, Okafor took her place at the podium. Where Zhang had been precise and clinical, Okafor's deep voice resonated with carefully calibrated emotion. "Distinguished colleagues," he began, "for 50 years, humanity has participated in this grand experiment called the Coalition. We have shared our technology, our resources, our protection. We have abided by constraints that felt foreign to our nature because we believed in the promise of a united galaxy." He paused, making eye contact with key delegations. "But make no mistake, our first commitment has always been to justice, not to bureaucracy." The Elysians called for help. They invoked a debt of honor that predates our membership in this body, and we responded as humans have always responded to allies in need. "By circumventing lawful authority," objected Kavoth. "By saving lives," Okafor countered, his voice hardening just enough to command attention without triggering threat responses. While this body was still scheduling preliminary discussions about forming an investigative committee, 17 human ships had already engaged the enemy. His gaze swept the chamber. "Tell me, Senator, how many Elysian lives would your process have saved?" As the political maneuvering continued in the Senate, coalition media networks broadcast new footage from Elysia. Human cinemedicine specialists had developed an emergency treatment for the Marudian bioweapon. Human construction teams were deploying experimental resonance stabilizers to prevent further degradation of crystalline structures. The humans, feared across the galaxy for their capacity for violence, now demonstrated their equal capacity for healing. Treating the wounded, rebuilding homes, and restoring hope with the same single-minded determination they had shown in battle. The journey to Elysia Prime demanded a level of subterfuge that would have been impossible for most coalition military teams. Fortunately, Captain Rice had spent 3 years in human intelligence before taking command of a warship, experience that proved invaluable as they navigated the shadows of coalition space. Their vessel, the Silent Echoes, had been requisitioned from the Coalition Merchant Registry, a nondescript cargo hauler with aftermarket modifications hidden beneath layers of carefully cultivated shabbiness. The crew consisted entirely of human specialists with cross-training in both combat and covert operations. Approaching Elysia Prime, Lieutenant Sato reported from the navigation console. Standard identification protocols initiated. Ray studied the tactical display. The small research outpost appeared quiet, but sensors detected multiple vessels in orbit that didn't match expected scientific or supply ships. "Those aren't standard coalition security vessels," noted Commander Frost, Reyes's second for this mission. "Look at the drive signatures, military grade, but with modified emission patterns to appear civilian." Reyes nodded. "Someone else is looking for our archivist. Lieutenant Vasquez, begin passive scanning. I want detailed crew compositions on those ships." Vasquez worked her console with practiced efficiency, reading predominantly Lorexian biosignatures, "Captain." But their movement patterns are all wrong for civilian or scientific personnel. Too regimented, too coordinated. "Mercenaries," Frost concluded. "Lorexians have been providing private security to frontier operations for decades. Highly trained, minimal oversight." As they approached the station's docking ring, Rise addressed her team. "The Dominion clearly has resources to deploy assets quickly. We've lost the element of surprise, but they don't know exactly what we're looking for." She gestured toward the small crystal shards secured in a resonance-shielded case. "Our advantage is that they believe the primary archives were successfully destroyed." "Detection protocols beginning," Sato warned. "They're scanning us with military-grade sensors masked as standard docking procedures." "Let them look," Rise replied calmly. "Our covers will hold unless they physically board us. Dock as planned. Maintain communication discipline." When they docked at Elysia Prime, Rise led a small team disguised as xenobiology researchers, while Frost remained aboard with a skeleton crew, ready for emergency extraction. The outpost corridors, normally bright with the crystalline architecture favored by Elysians, were shadowed and eerily quiet. "Movement patterns suggest the station is under hostile control," whispered Lieutenant Park, his augmented senses detecting subtle signs invisible to standard human perception. "Security personnel at key junctions, communications being monitored." They rounded a corner and encountered a checkpoint manned by Lorexians in coalition security uniforms. Rise approached with the easy confidence of someone with legitimate business. Identification and purpose, demanded the lead Lorexian, his translator rendering his harmonics into clipped, precise speech. Reyes presented forged credentials identifying her team as members of the Coalition Cinemedicine Initiative. Emergency Response Team, she explained. We're here to collect biometric data on Elysian survivors for treatment protocol development. The Lorexian studied their credentials with suspicious thoroughness. Your authorization codes match our registry, he admitted reluctantly. Proceed to research level 3, but do not deviate from designated areas. As they moved deeper into the station, Captain, there's a sealed section in the lower levels drawing significant power, but registered as uninhabited in station logs. Perfect misdirection, Reyes thought. Hide something by making it look like nothing, while simultaneously making it appear you're hiding something else entirely. They used maintenance tunnels to bypass security checkpoints, moving with the silent efficiency that made humans natural infiltrators. When they reached the sealed section, they found a crystalline vault similar to the one on Elysia. The song continues, Reyes said to the sealed door, repeating the elder's phrase. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, harmonic resonances began to vibrate through the crystalline structure. The door shimmered, becoming transparent, revealing an elderly Elysian surrounded by dozens of crystal matrix cubes. The backup archives. I've been waiting, Archivist Kelix said simply, her crystalline form dim but intact. They came 3 days ago, searching. Destroyed much, but could not find what they did not understand how to seek. Reyes quickly explained their mission while Park and Sato secured the archives for transport. We need to move quickly, she concluded. Once we extract these archives, the Dominion forces will know their mission has failed. Kelix's crystalline form pulsed with what Reyes had learned to recognize as Elysian determination. These records contain more than historical data, Captain. They hold evidence of the Dominion's existence dating back to before the Coalition's founding, proof that they have manipulated interspecies relations for centuries. But what is their ultimate goal? Reyes asked, the question that had driven them across Coalition space, a fundamental reshaping of galactic civilization. Kelix replied, her resonance patterns conveying grave concern. They believe certain species are evolutionarily superior and destined to rule. Others they consider resource species, meant to be exploited. They have worked for generations to subtly undermine Coalition principles of species equality. As they prepared to move the archives, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Captain, Vasquez's voice came urgently through their secure channel, multiple Dominion assets converging on your position. And something worse, Senator Xarvik himself just docked with a personal security team. Reyes nodded grimly. Time for Plan Omega. 3 months after the Elysian crisis, the Galactic Coalition gathered on Earth. The first time the full Senate had convened on the human homeworld. Many delegates struggled with the higher gravity and dense atmosphere, requiring adaptive technology or environmental suits. Yet they came in unprecedented numbers to witness what many were calling a turning point in galactic history. The setting: Earth's ancient Hall of Nations in Geneva, surrounded by mountains that human ancestors had once viewed as the homes of gods, provided a dramatic backdrop. Coalition species accustomed to their artificial habitats and carefully controlled environments found themselves both uncomfortable and awed by the raw power of Earth's natural systems, the very forces that had shaped humanity's evolution. Outside the hall, demonstrations of human culture and technology had been arranged. Elysian children, their crystalline forms now stabilized and growing again, played alongside young humans in specially designed interaction zones. Medical teams showcased the treatment protocols developed to counter the Marudian bioweapon. Knowledge freely shared with all Coalition species. Engineers demonstrated new crystalline resonance stabilizers developed through human-Elysian collaboration. Inside, the mood was more somber. The Dominion conspiracy had been fully exposed through the evidence recovered from Elysia Prime. 17 senators and over 200 officials from dozens of species had been implicated in a plot spanning centuries. The Marudian leadership had been dismantled, their slave empire crumbling without their political protectors. Most significantly, the Elysian archives, now secured in multiple locations with copies maintained by diverse species, had revealed historical manipulations dating back to the Coalition's founding. Worlds that had been deliberately set against each other discovered shared histories of exploitation. Species that considered themselves natural enemies found evidence of artificial conflicts engineered for Dominion benefit. Admiral Zhang stood before the assembled dignitaries, her uniform bearing new honors but otherwise unchanged. Behind her stood representatives from every human world and colony, a visual reminder of humanity's relatively small numbers but outsized impact on galactic politics. Humanity evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. She began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. Our gravity crushes most of you. Our atmospheric pressure constricts your breathing. Our pathogens would devastate your immune systems. Our predators evolved alongside us, making us faster, stronger, more alert to threat. She paused, looking across the assembly. We developed cooperation and compassion not despite these challenges, but because of them. When everything is trying to kill you, you learn to value those who stand beside you. You learn that survival isn't just about individual strength. It's about collective resilience. Today, we extend that same commitment to all peaceful species in this coalition. She stepped aside as the Elysian ambassador, her crystalline form catching the natural sunlight streaming through the hall's windows, approached the podium. The Elysian's appearance marked a poignant moment. Her species had nearly been wiped from existence, yet here she stood on the homeworld of their saviors. When the darkness came, the ambassador began, her translator rendering her harmonic speech into words all could understand. Humanity did not hesitate. They did not calculate political advantage. They simply acted because it was right. She gestured to the human delegation. Many species fear the Deathworlders, but we have seen their true nature. Their capacity for violence is matched only by their capacity for justice. Across the chamber, coalition representatives listened with varying reactions, some with newfound respect, others with lingering unease. The Palaxian delegate, whose species had supported the humans from the beginning, nodded in solemn agreement. The Valerian High Speaker, traditionally wary of human unpredictability, seemed thoughtful rather than alarmed. As the new coalition charter was formally presented, establishing stronger protections for all member species and creating mutual defense pacts with clear intervention protocols, Captain Rice stood at attention in the honor guard. Her mission to Elysia Prime had nearly cost her career, yet the evidence she recovered had changed the course of galactic history. A young Elysian approached her, moving with the distinctive gliding motion of their species. In their crystalline hands, they carried a small sculpture, clearly crafted with great care despite the youngster's still developing skills. "My people will remember," the child said simply, offering the gift. Reyes accepted it, a tiny sculpture depicting a human hand and an Elysian hand, joined together. The crystalline structure captured light in a way that created rainbow patterns when tilted properly. "So will ours," she promised, her normally controlled expression softening. After the ceremony, Ambassador Okafor found Reyes on one of the observation balconies overlooking Lake Geneva, the alpine landscape, harsh, beautiful, and utterly natural, stretched before them. "Quite a view," Okafor commented, joining her at the railing. Reyes nodded. "Hard to believe we evolved on a world this beautiful and this deadly. Perhaps that's why we understand better than most the balance between creation and destruction," Okafor suggested, "the duality that most species struggle to reconcile." Reyes studied the sculpture the Elysian child had given her, watching how the light played through its crystalline structure. "What happens now?" she asked. "The Dominion's been exposed, but ideas like theirs don't die easily." Okafor smiled slightly. "Now we do what humans have always done. We adapt. We build stronger alliances. We remain vigilant. He gestured toward the hall where species from across the galaxy were mingling, communicating, beginning to forge new connections based on truth rather than manipulation. And we remember that our greatest strength has never been our capacity for violence, but our capacity for connection. In the vastness of space, humanity had found its purpose, not conquest, not isolation, but protection. The Deathworlders, tempered by their harsh origins, had become the shield behind which more fragile species could flourish. And any who threatened that peace would learn why humanity's fury was legendary across the stars, not because humans loved violence, but because they loved what they protected even more.